afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Alexis Taylor. I am here for another edition of the Chicken Box. I'm filling in for Dr. Draper, Jay, Impeccable. I know that they're your usual host, but I'm here today, Afro Managing Editor, and we have a special guest talking with us today. We're going to get on the box. We're going to be talking about women who are in the documentarian space, people who are making documentaries about so many things here in Baltimore. Dr. S. Rasheem is here with us today.
Hey.
All right. Dr. Rasheem, thank you for giving us this time today. All right, we're going to get right into it. First things, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, how you came to be in this documentarian and social scientist space. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure thing. Well, thank you so much for having me on. So glad that I'm on with you, Alexis. I know that you are guest filling in, but I feel like the vibe is good. It's going to be so good. They're going to ask you to come back and do it again. That's what I'm feeling in the energy. They're gonna be like,
I received that.
Yeah, we want Alexis more in the rotation. That's going to be the new request. I'm sure of it. So yes, I'm Dr. Rasheem. I'm an applied social scientist and researcher. And one of the things that has brought me really to this space is because over the years, I've conducted quite a bit of research around Black populations, and specifically Black populations in Baltimore, whether it's Black women on the margins, Black mothers of daughters, or Black women in education, just different areas within Baltimore. What happens with that research, though, Alexis, is it ends up being locked away behind like an academic paywall, or it is used by researchers or other academicians or other, other folks that are not in community, right? Mm-hmm. Other folks that are not the folks that are just like actually in the data. And so the thing that actually brought me to the space of documentation is, how can I make this research, this information consumable to a wider audience? And because everyone is watching videos, whether you're watching it on YouTube or Netflix or a GIF or GIF or whatever the name of it is, however we're getting our information, we're largely getting a good portion of our information through video. So what I did with the Baltimore Legacy Project is basically take those skills, that knowledge, that information, and rather than just put it in an academic paper or have it published elsewhere, I wanted to bring it back to the people and also have the people be a part of the design and the analytics of the research. So that's a little bit about me, and that's kind of how I came to this documentary space.
I love it. And I see so many documentaries right now focusing on the issues of Black women. I've seen there are documentaries right now making headlines about the maternal health issues faced by Black women, recidivism in the Black community. What is it that sparks your interest on a particular topic? Because this is not your first time in this space making a documentary that is focused on Baltimore. We're going to talk about your new project coming out. That's already, the premiere, y'all, is already sold out. So just to tell you a little bit about the anticipation level in the city right now. So what is it? Take us to like when you are seeing things, what's happening in your mind when you first decide to take on a topic? How do you choose what to go after when there's so many topics to tackle?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I look at is I look at the material conditions of people in community. I look at what community is talking about, what are the pain points. And I really just kind of let them, in a lot of ways, guide what that is like. So one of the things with the Baltimore Legacy Project, it is largely a culmination of what will end up being hundreds of interviews with Baltimore residents. And you start to see some themes, you start to see some patterns, you start to see, oh, this is coming up, this is a pressing issue. So that lets me know a lot of times like where specifically to focus. I'll tell you with the Baltimore Legacy Project, because it's a focus on legacy, and there's an aspect of legacy that is history, right? That is our past. And then there's folks that is our present and then our future. And so with the Baltimore Legacy Project, what I aim to do is kind of bridge those three together. Baltimore's past, Baltimore's present, along with Baltimore's future. So all of the documentaries in the series will have a historical component. Okay. So the first documentary started off with Baltimore Still Rising, because that was a contemporary historical event that happened in a collective in the collective of Baltimore, right? So people have a point of reference of a recent point of history that they shared, kind of a entree, if you will, into exploring history, because history, for whatever reason, people don't think of it as a very sexy topic. So we have to kind of get them in the mood, if you will. And so because with the first one was a 10-year reflection, it was something that they could tap into. Yes, this happened a while ago. Yes, history is important. I remember where I was when this happened. And so some of the themes that came up in that informed, okay, how do we go even further back? So each one of these taps into history, but it also is tapping into even more specifically, like what is happening present day, because each one of our present day issues has a historical source. So one of the things you'll see in all of these films is whatever present day issue that is being discussed, it will be traced back to a historical source.
All right, and this is the Afro. So shout out! I had a chance to see the first documentary that you did, and that was focused more around Freddie Gray and how that impacted the community here in Baltimore after, in that, like you said, that 10-year retrospective. So shout out to the Afro Charities team, because I love to see the Afro in that first documentary. Can you talk about how you lean on Black press to be able to tell your stories? Because when I look through the Afro archives, it's just such a treasure trove of information. And you say it's not sexy, but there are some things in the Afro archives that even today could be on Shade Room, on TMZ, and that's what people are consuming. Some of those more, I guess, controversial topics, scandals, things like that. But also in the archives of the Afro-American newspapers are those things that have happened, the record of things that have happened throughout history. And a lot of times people come back to our archives as that source, as a point to verify information and just find those stories that are untold. So what's your relationship with Black press, and how do you lean on them as you inform your documentaries?
Yeah. So, I think that you really hit on something when you were talking about the Black press, and even more specifically, like the archives, like back in the day, the way that the press would engage with folks. The Black press historically has been the space where we actually get to hear our stories and our voice, right? And not just in the Black press, but I will say in the press, the first 200 years of press was largely dependent upon subscription purchases. So when folks talked and folks engaged, they had to be responsive to people. They had to be responsive to community. And then if you narrow that down and look even more further into Black press, there was a lot of our stories that were not being told in the mainstream media, unless if it was something like exaggerated or lies or something shameful, or, they weren't talking about social justice issues. They weren't talking about things like lynching. They weren't talking about these things. So where you would typically go historically was the Black press. The Black press was the voice of the people, right? Then sometime passed along, and then advertisement space and more corporations starts to be more involved. And the press in general, not just the Black press, but the press in general, the focus started to shift as a global shift in terms of like how we are able to engage, what voices get heard, what stories get heard, how social justice-y they will be, what things will they challenge, and what things they decide not to challenge. Where you find a lot of those juicy nuggets, Alexis, you hit it right on the head, is in some of the historical older documentations, because you will see, like behind you have "We Shall Overcome" in big font, right? You have a stick of dynamite that stirs the city, right? You have all of these things that in our past in the press you would see, because we reported the issues in that particular way. So to get a lot of that is where you would have to go. I think now there's been a lot of shifts with the press, because it's not dependent on as much on subscription as it is on advertisement or corporations. So I spent a lot of times in the archives in general. When I started out doing the Baltimore Legacy Project overall, I did two things that actually I thought paid a bit of homage to the Afro. So I created this. There was a social Coppin has a Dorothy, I believe it's the Dorothy Heights Social Justice Center, and they commissioned me to do some artwork. And I was in communication with Dr. Draper. And at that time, she gave me a lot of prints of old newspapers. And so at the backdrop of the canvas is all of these different Afro newspaper cuttings that Dr. Draper gave me. And then on the forefront of it was a young contemporary person with their fist up, bridging that past and present. And I was grateful that she gave me the opportunity to do that. And I'll also share that, share a picture of it if you would like. But so that was one way that I was, seeking to pay homage to the Afro. Another thing is, because I value it as an institution and a lot of its history. In the beginning of this film, of the first film, Baltimore Still Rising, I was like, there's tons of news. There's other newspapers in the city, but I specifically wanted to engage with the Afro. So at the beginning, you'll see all of these clips, largely of some of them from the Afro, where it shows this, it'll show police injustice and it traces it back to contemporary times. And yeah, into a more present time. And that was a way that the archives in general can like really help to support to help tell that story. I do wish to, since we're talking about, I do wish to have a long-standing, if possible, relationship with the Afro News, and I would say the archives. And here's why, Alexis, because the Baltimore Legacy Project is a series of 9 documentaries. It's not just 9 documentaries. It's 9 documentaries. It's social media posts. It is a column. And it is also a podcast, right? And one of the things that I've come to understand when I had an opportunity to interview Dr. Draper is that the Afro is not just a newspaper, it is media. And I feel like it's a really great opportunity to keep that media alive when you have, like we just said, a sold out premiere. The first one was sold out. This premiere is sold out, and there's an encore premiere. Can you imagine the number of eyeballs that would be, okay, they're watching this film. If it's in the trailer, it's in the trailer, So I look forward to connecting with Black press specifically to establish some of those more long-term relationships to talk about what those social issues are in our communities.
And I think it's a very needed partnership. I see Black press all the time used in different documentaries, and it just reinforces that how important that partnership is. It brings the archives to life, but it puts that Black press, that record that we've been keeping for nearly 200 years. Black press turns 200 in 2027. And I love that your work goes to that central mission of Black press, which is we wish to plead our own cause. That was in the very first Black paper, Freedom's Journal, Russ Norman Cornish, 1827. They said that for too long, far too long, other people have spoken for us. And so I love that when I see Black people moving into that space to create their own record, to tell their own stories. I love that connection. I love that tie to Black press. And it's kind of, it's all under the same umbrella for me. You have the print media, which I will say we need subscribers. We need all the subscribers we can get. Our print product is subscriber based, so make sure you have that coming to your house every week. But when you have that umbrella of Black press, it certainly has included the people who are making the documentaries. And I'm seeing more and more people start to step up and really say, hey, we're going to tell our own stories. We're going to use the records that the Black newspapers and Black media companies have. We're going to use that information they have on record because people are trying to change that record. So I'm glad that we have people who are working in Black press, who are doing the documentaries, really telling the stories. And specifically when I see it happening here in Baltimore. So like you said, your first documentary was Baltimore Still Rising. It was a retrospective look at the 10 years after the death of Freddie Gray. This next piece, let's talk about it. Let's get into this next topic that you are tackling, which is the impact that, and from what I understand, well, I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. I'm looking forward to seeing it when it comes out later this summer. But when I think of the stories that come out of Baltimore, the stories that Baltimore is known for, you cannot talk about Baltimore stories without talking about The Wire. And so this next film that you have coming up, Beyond the Wire, another Baltimore story, tell me first why it's important to reshape the narrative that has been so firmly set in place about this city. And, why did you decide to tackle that as a Black woman?
Yeah. So, one, yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. Beyond the Wire is a disruption in the consciousness of the global consciousness of what people think of when they think of Baltimore, right? In talking to several people, and I'm sure you know this, Alexis, you probably had this experience where you go other places and you mention Baltimore and they say it's like The Wire. And, you live in the city, so, we're not all ducking from like gunshots and on, and having all of these experiences. It was a show that was a cultural phenomenon, right? It was a great piece of art, very entertaining. Seemed like it was very well done. But it did not tell the whole story, right? Not only does it not tell the whole story, it doesn't, in my opinion, show the fullness that is Baltimore. And that's very important because these narratives shape things like policy, right? They shape things like our culture, our attitude, how we respond. So when we talk about things like social justice issues or laws or policies or stopping the automatic charging of youth as adults, when we talk about that, that's not separated from our entertainment and culture, because our entertainment and culture is telling us a story, is giving people a narrative. Oh, this city is poverty, is drugs, is violence. So when a policy comes up that says we need to lock all of them up, we need to do all of this, they already have been preconditioned that these, that this is a particular set of people that are inherently criminal, inherently bad, and we need to do this. So the shaping of the narrative is not a small thing. Storytelling is not light work. And documentation is not neutral, right? Who the documenter is, what they decide to document, what they decide to put in, and what they decide to leave out tells a particular type of story that has a social impact. So it is a cultural phenomenon. It is an art piece, and it doesn't just stay in art. That film, that show, I am sure informed, impacted programs, education, policy, because it shaped our minds and our consciousness, and not just ours, but the rest of the world. And it told the rest of the world that this is who we are, and that's pretty much all of who we are. Now, it doesn't, this particular documentary that's coming out June 18th is the world premiere, and then the encore premiere June 25th. Tickets are still available for that. This film not only deals with this misconception about what Baltimore is, but it goes beyond that, hence the name Beyond the Wire. But it goes beyond that. It talks about the work that Baltimoreans have done and have done over the years and continue to do in the city. Right now, Alexis, as you know, we're experiencing this historic drop in crime in our city, and everyone is, we have different people clamoring to take credit, like, oh, it's because of this, it's because of this. But the thing that I tell people is that the real answer about why we have this historic drop in crime, it's much more human, and the answer is much more Baltimore. And you learn why we have this historic drop in crime in the film. I feel like that's an important story to tell when we're talking about legacy, and we're talking about what was our past, what is our present, and what is our future. It's important for us to document these things so that we have a blueprint and leave these tools behind for future generations, so that should something like this come up again, we know how to solve and tackle it. So in this film, yes, you will learn about Baltimore. You will learn some things about Baltimore's history. You'll also get some insights on some of the conditions that contributed to some aspects of what you see show up in The Wire. And then you'll see what we're doing, what Baltimore is still doing right now. And then you'll see a little bit about our trajectory. You'll hear in the film about credible messengers, faith leaders, councilmen, everyday people, school teachers who are in the city, who love the city, who are fighting for this city to make it even more beautiful, even more expansive, and go even further beyond anything that anything The Wire ever showed.
All right, so full disclosure, I am rewatching The Wire right now. And I started about a month ago. I'm in season 5, episode 3 right now. And so it's interesting looking at it as an adult, especially as a journalist, because there's a season that focuses on the press. And I was a Baltimore City school teacher for 6 years. So there was a season where it talked about, the struggles of the inner city students. What would you say to people who say that The Wire did give an accurate depiction, that it did accurately show what was happening? And the funny thing is, this is my first time really sitting down and watching it. I'm watching it with my man. He's from Baltimore. And so watching it with someone who's from Baltimore, who remembers Amsterdam, who knew people, had people within, that were close to him that unfortunately were, struggling with addiction. So he was directly, seeing these things with his own eyes. He was seeing, he knows what happened in city schools because he was a student, all 12 years here. And so watching it with a Baltimorean and now living in the city for, I won't say how long I've been here, but I've been here a minute.
Okay.
Since 2008. I moved here in 2008, and I would say I had already seen a little bit of The Wire before I moved here, but watching it again as an adult, as someone who saw firsthand city schools, who sees what's happening in the press, who works with the people who are in these elected offices on a regular basis as we're creating content, there are some people who may say that it was an accurate depiction. So what would you say to them who, people love The Wire here, even though I agree that it did take the worst of Baltimore and take those images around the world. It is a stain on the reputation of the city because that isn't all we are. But what would you say to the people who are still living the lives and those stories that we saw in The Wire over 2 decades ago? What would you say to them who say it's an accurate depiction?
Yeah, I love this question, because one of the things that I will say about myself, and we could probably even also say this about you, Alexis, you could think over your life of things that you've done that aren't the most favorable things. But if people took a collection of those things and just focused on that and said, this is who Alexis is, I would gather to wager that there would be people who in your life who would say, that is not all that she is. She is so much more than that. She is beyond that. And some would even say, so I see that you're showing that she did this, but you are not showing why she did this. You are not showing the conditions that caused it. You're not showing the others systems and mechanisms in control, or what she's responding to, right? So and a person could say, no, but I have pictures of Alexis doing this. I have footage of Alexis doing this, but they don't have these other things, right? So what I'm saying, or what the film is saying, is not saying that none of this is true. This is a blatant, complete lie. There are some people who feel like that the exaggeration went too far with some of the characters that people actually know. But outside of that, no one is saying that none of these things ever happened. It is saying that you did not tell a complete story. And when you do not do that, you are giving a representation of a person that is false. You know how you get into a conversation with someone and you're telling a story about a beef between you and somebody else, and you are telling your side with like all of your information, and it is accurate-ish, right? And that other person is telling their side and it's accurate-ish, right? And so it doesn't say that none of these things are true or does not happen. What it is saying is you did not tell the full story. And in telling a full story, there is a way in which not telling the full story is a lie, right? So if I came in, for example, me and you beefing, and a person walks in and all they see is you hitting me in the head, they would say, man, Alexis is over there just kicking Rasheem's butt, keep hitting her in the head. Like, she's such a bad person. Like, she's violent. But they didn't see that you were responding to, I had hit you first. Or they didn't respond to, we were actually playing a game where we were playing tag and it was your turn, right? Or they don't see that there's this historical thing that happens behind that has created an environment where this is how we have been taught to communicate. So if you're going to tell the bad or the ugly, because I feel like it focused so much on the bad and the ugly without telling the fullness of folks, that when you do that, it borders on lie for me.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. And I love that, because there really are so many other stories that you could tell from this city. I mean, this city is so full of inspiration when you look back through the archives, when you look back at the history that has come out of Baltimore. And so that leads to my next question. So when you, in this new documentary, Beyond the Wire, when you put out the trailer, I had a chance to see that some of the conversation goes into, to your point, that it's not just the bad, but there are redemption stories that come out of the stories from The Wire, the real life stories. And so I like that it seems like in the trailer, I see that there are people who are talking about how, members of, well, you have Barksdale, you have who turned his life around, Tater Barksdale, who turned his life around and then ultimately succumbed to this same violence that he was fighting, but he turned his life around. And it's kind of like when I think of, anyone's arc, anyone's, story, Malcolm X comes to mind, not that those two were alike, but we focus on all of the beginning stories of Malcolm X, his life is red, his, hatred of the white community. But then we don't talk about when he became, that new man, and he saw things differently right before his death. And so I think I see that same thing happening in The Wire, where you talk about all of these different characters who, did all of this. And yes, it tore down the community, but then you don't talk about how since that time they've actually turned their lives around. And so why did you decide to address that part of it? It seems like you addressed that in the film.
Yeah. I mean, back to the name again, this is beyond. And because I don't want, there is a part of it, of course, that has a focus on The Wire, but this film isn't really about The Wire. This film is about Baltimore. It's about setting the record a little bit more straight about who Baltimore is, and how Baltimore shows up. That's really what all of the films are about. One of the reasons that I feel like it is really important to tell that story of folks coming back to community, these returning citizens like Eric Brown, EB of Peace Team, or if we're talking about Captain Andrew of We Are Us, or if we're talking about Bilal Rahman of Baltimore Brothers, and so many other people who are engaged in this work, who are on the other side of it initially and are coming back to community to say that, we want to turn things around. We want to contribute and make things better. It's important for a few reasons. One of them being, and I'll go back to this again, that historic drop in crime. It is returning citizens that I feel like we can give a bulk of that credit to. Returning citizens that can talk that can get to a shooter. That returning citizens, incredible messengers who young people could call 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Police aren't gonna, like, if they come at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody's getting arrested. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So people who can get young people right now to put their guns down. So if there's other areas, other cities dealing with violence, dealing with some of these things, we have models here to show how it's being addressed and how it's being handled. One, I also want to tell a full story. I love that you use Malcolm X because he's such a dynamic person in that he constantly reinvented himself, right? From Malcolm Little to Detroit Red to Malcolm X, and then to change his name again later in his life. If we just told the story of Malcolm X and we stopped at Detroit Red, we have a person who is living in a brothel. He's eating pork. He got white girlfriends. He's selling dope. He's doing all of these things. Right. Yeah. Right? And someone would see it and be like, I know, I saw Malcolm. He did that. I was there. And then we put that as that is him. that is like an incomplete truth. It borders on lie, right? And then when you have this image of a city or a person preceding the person before a person gets here, that impacts commerce, that impacts visitation, that impacts who's going to come to Baltimore with, we're portraying it as the murder capital of the world, of the violence capital of the world. These stories matter. They don't just matter to us because we're Black people and we're a community. They matter to our bottom dollar. They matter to how we move in space. They matter to policy. They're impacting things on all of these levels. So again, storytelling, the work of storytelling is not like word, is something to be taken seriously. If we're going to tell the story about this city, I think we should tell a more fuller story, and also let the residents of that city be involved in telling and shaping that story, right? Not extracted stories from certain press and just from police records and that sort of thing. You have to really tell like a full story. And there are films that I feel like talk about crime and violence in city, and they tell a more full story. Like I watched The Chi. I feel like The Chi tells a more complete story about what it's like in Chicago. I do see, their drug dealers and gang members, but I also see how they interact with their mothers and how they care about their children, and how they're just more multidimensional characters, and they have a history in a way that I just don't see in The Wire. And I think that outside of that, it just comes through just in the fact that what people know or believe they understand about this city is an incomplete story and an incomplete truth.
Okay. My next question now, I will say I was in the comments on one of your posts earlier this week. So it's just the fact that we're talking today is right on time.
Okay.
And I saw that you posted an interview from a local coach here, and in the comments was one of the actors and one of Baltimore's I would say, largest supporters. I see Sonia Sohn out there really doing great things in Baltimore and putting more for the city, bringing resources here and things like that. And so in the comments, I saw that there was a conversation happening about how on one side, people were saying that The Wire could, as far as cast and crew and hiring and all of that, they could have done more. And they came here, for example, in the scenes where there were people who were addicted to drugs, and they came here. You have actors portraying this on the street, and you have people who are really living that life on the same street. There were conversations about exploitation of the problem, and also just, that whole issue of coming here to bring your series, shoot your series, and tell this story. And where do locals come in? And so I saw Sonia Sohn saying that they use locals, that they try to tell an authentic story as possible. Do you have a response to that?
I believe her. I believe that they did try to tell a authentic story. I don't know that, like, from her standpoint, I don't know that. I don't know, and it's also not something that I'm particularly concerned with, whether or not it was their intention to tell an incomplete story. I don't know, and I'm not. That's not something that I'm concerned with. The thing that I'm concerned with now is like kind of setting the record straight, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that I will say too is the person. His name is Ray Kelly. He is Citizens Policing. I think he's CEO of Citizens Policing Project or something like that, who has been a longtime advocate in the city, has done a lot of work in the city around whether it's getting local control over police, whether it's doing violence interruption work. I believe him also, right? The story that he tells, if folks are curious about seeing this, it's on my IG, Baltimore Legacy Project. It is a video that was posted either today or it was probably the video from yesterday. And the video says 1900 block of Division Street. So what Ray is doing is he's telling his account that he saw with his own eyes on the street that he lives on, that people were trying to disrupt the set because of this or because of that. I believe that, right? The challenge is there's a danger in a single story. And this is why I love the Baltimore Legacy Project and even the approach to it, because there's 20 different voices And these are voices of street organizers, people at different socioeconomic status backgrounds, former mayors, people who are returning citizens. This is not a single story film. This is not a single story project, right? So if a person is telling their account of what they experienced, I believe them. He was there. He would know. If Sonia Stone said that she hired or someone hired an extra, I believe that. So both of those could be true. And I don't feel like
if I'm remembering correctly, he was talking about how the residents they kind of felt disrespected that The Wire was filming on their block and that they were kind of making art out of this real situation that people were dealing with. And yes, some of them may be that may be their life. And yes, they may have gotten a check that day to fill in as an extra. And they were saying that, some of these people were real life addicts or, real life homeless people that they brung in. Okay, they benefited. But I guess I don't completely agree with how they use that. If that did happen, if they were using real homeless people and real people who are addicted to drugs, it's like, okay, yes, you contributed to the local economy. Yes, you gave them a job that day and whatnot. But to Kelly's point, some of those people are still in that same position. And so we're not talking about the economic impact. Like, they felt disrespected that people were here with cameras, making art out of, making, I won't say light, but they're making this into entertainment.
There's
no entertainment to that. Let me ask you this question. How did you come to the decisions on how you were going to actually accept interviews for this person? How did you decide to include the voices that you included?
Yeah, I did what in research is called snowball sampling. So you get with one person who's a credible messenger, meant similarly but differently in this context of research. But you get with the person that is like a source or in the eye of a particular situation. You talk to that person, they tell you the story about what happened. You ask them who else was there, and they tell you who else was there. Or they'll say, oh, you should also ask this person or check this person. So I did a bit of that, and also just reaching out to folks to ask them about it. Now, oddly enough, I'll tell you this, Alexis. So much of the film, it wasn't like, even at the start of the Baltimore Legacy Project, I wasn't sure whether or not that I was going to do a Beyond the Wire film. What shaped me doing it is me doing interviews on other stuff.
Largely. And it kept coming up.
And this kept coming up. This is one of those things in research where it comes up repeatedly and you start to see, oh, this is a theme. Oh, how do I code this? Oh, this is it. So literally the Baltimore residents shaped what the story is, what was next, what we're going to talk about next, because it's just a matter of folks talking, me listening, documenting it, and then surfacing some of the themes.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. Just a couple of more questions. So what is next for you? What's next for you? What's next for Baltimore Legacy Project?
Well, the most immediate next is I hope that everyone, if you did not get a chance to get your ticket to Beyond the Wire for the June 18th, already sold out world premiere, I hope that you go ahead and you can either go to BaltimoreLegacyProject.com, or you can actually just go to Eventbrite and put in Beyond the Wire, and you'll be able to get tickets to the June 25th showing here in Baltimore at the Senator Theater at 7 p.m. That is the most immediate next. The next that is after that, Baltimore Legacy Project is not just a documentary series, it is also a column. So every 2 weeks, every other week, there is a column in another newspaper. It's in the Baltimore Times. Baltimore
Times.
Say it again.
Shout out to Baltimore Times. Shout out to
Baltimore Times. Yes. Where every month, there's at least 2 columns that is on Baltimore's history, Baltimore's culture, Baltimore's legacy. And then what's next after that is in June, the end of June, beginning of July, will be the Baltimore Legacy Project podcast. So those are some of the things that are coming up next.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Now, at the end of this, they usually do this thing where you get on the box, where you give your final thoughts. And so, when it comes to just this topic of making documentaries, documenting Black history, especially Baltimore's history, I'll give you 30 seconds to get on the box and just give us your final thoughts.
My final thoughts is that documentation is not neutral. Who tells the story, who writes it, who decides what parts get told and untold is very important. Make sure that we are holding sacred our stories and holding accountable our storytellers.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you again. I really do look forward to seeing Beyond the Wire. As I said, I mean, I'm watching watching The Wire right now, and I have so many thoughts. And so, part of those thoughts are one of those thoughts is that there's so much more to Baltimore. There's so much more to Charm City
That's right.
than those images that have gone around the world. And so, I'm grateful that you are telling the other side of things. And I would say it's the larger side of things, like crime, poverty. That's not Baltimore.
Right.
It's, it's like you said, the community members that you interview, the residents, the legacies that each resident has within their own family history. There's so many beautiful stories here in Baltimore. So thank you for telling this. I'm looking forward to this second documentary from you. And I will hopefully be able to get a ticket to June 25th if it doesn't sell out.
Yeah, jump on it. Jump on it. Also, you can get a press pass.
You
Cover it.
I think that's how I got into the first one. So not above shooting that email over.
Yep.
All right. But if you're looking to see that story Beyond the Wire, make sure that you check out Dr. Rasheem's work with Baltimore Legacy Project and all the things that I'm sure we will get from you in the future. All right. Thank you for joining thank y'all for watching another edition of Chicken Box, and we will be back next week.